Hi, my name is Paul Quinones. I work for the MTA, Metropolitan Transit Authority. I'm a train operator, and I've been a train operator for 15 years. I always wanted to be a train operator. I used to ride with my dad in the subways, and I remember being as young as 5 years old and telling him that that was something I wanted to do. I wanted to drive the trains. And so in the year 2000, that was the first year that they had given out the test, as they call open competitive, where you didn't have to have another position within the MTA to work as a train operator. And so I took the test and I passed, and they hired me in 2001, and I never looked back. I've been a train operator since. The positives of the working for the MTA for me is that I like moving trains. It's something that I had always wanted to do. And growing up in New York City, I kind of grew up in a poor neighborhood. It's a job, it's a union job, it has good benefits. I'm able to raise my family, raise my children, and have a decent living for myself, especially the way times are in New York and the United States now. So, I have something that I feel safe. I don't, worry so much about getting laid off. And I get to do something that for the most part, I always said I wanted to do as a kid. That's kind of as good as it gets, for someone like me. There are some negatives. The biggest thing, it's hard to have a life outside of transit. If you come down, it was hard as when I was new, because there's really no consideration for your time. You're extra. They throw you anywhere, anytime. And even now, after 15 years, I still find that, a lot of times you can't plan. You have to kind of be where you're needed to be. And once you're on that train, that's it. You're responsible for those people, and you're responsible for that train, and you have to get them from A to B. And that train from A to B, no questions asked. There's no, I'm sick, or anything like that. That train is yours to go. Also, one of the cons of the job, one of the big negatives is, this is a serious job. You're obviously responsible for, hundreds, thousands of people throughout the course of the day you can have on your train. And so, if you work in an office and you make a mistake, a lot of times, your boss might get annoyed, and that's it. But working down here, mistakes could really cost you, literally. The Transit Authority takes that very serious. So when you do make a mistake, which hopefully doesn't happen, they could they can really penalize you pretty heavy for that. So that's kind of a big negative if you're a person who stresses a lot, or you don't do the job properly. So the highlights of my MTA career. About maybe 10, 11 years ago, I was working on the 5 train, and I am leaving 138th Grand Concourse. And as I'm going into that turn to go into 149th, there was a track fire. And it was a pretty massive fire. It was starting to climb up into the walls. It was spreading pretty bad. And I had a load of passengers. And it was in the heart of rush hour. So, I stopped the train, and we had to evacuate, get everybody off the train. And if you work for the MTA, if you're a train operator, you never hear thank you. It's very rare that someone actually says thank you. And it was one guy who, as the fire department was coming, he actually says thank you.
The next stop is Allerton Avenue.
Stand clear of the closing doors, please.
So a normal day for me, I wake up 2:30 every morning. I shower, get ready for work, make my coffee. I have to have, I keep a thing of coffee because that's just too early for me to get up. No matter how long I've been doing it, I never get used to it. I get to work at 4 in the morning. The first thing I have to do is prepare a train for service. So I go to the storage yard, and that's a New Lots terminal in Brooklyn. So I get my 5 train, prepare it, make sure that it's fully functional, doors work, nothing under the train, that it's charged, it's ready. And I take that train from New Lots over to Flatbush Avenue. There are other trains that are in service with people that are actually moving. So it's a process. You don't just go in and out. You're sort of always being put in the back while those trains are being prioritized. So I usually get to Flatbush Terminal maybe about 5:50, 6 o'clock. That gives me time to, get a little breakfast, maybe a cup of oatmeal. I usually eat oatmeal. And then I make my trip. I go from Flatbush over to the Bronx with passengers now. And then I make another trip from Dyer Avenue in the Bronx to Bowling Green. And that's the hard one. That's in a harder rush hour. It's a lot of passengers, school kids. And then I take that same train and I bring it back up to the Bronx. And then that's at the end of my day. That's the end of my shift. And I go home and I repeat again. Saddest thing that ever happened to me working for the MTA. In 2011, 6 years ago, I was working on the F train, and I'm pulling into a station, and a heroin addict had fallen onto the tracks, and I didn't see him. And so when I was coming in, my train made contact with him, and he passed away, unfortunately. That was very hard for me. That was probably not just the saddest moment, at my job, but probably the saddest moment of my life. I had been a train operator for about 9 years at the time, and I had, I knew that that's something that happens, but it hadn't happened to me, and it was a life-changing experience, and it was very hard, especially the first 5 months of the job. Yeah, that about as bad as it could get for me working down here. So when I had my fatality, the first 4 months, I was out a total of 9 months. I had nightmares. I had panic attacks in my sleep. The first 4 months were really hard. I mean, I could barely eat. I was depressed. It was really tough on my family too. But then about 4 months in, my doctor had suggested to me that I get a hobby. And I had always was curious about photography, but never had the time to go out and buy a camera or anything like that. So being that I was home, I went out and bought a camera from Target. I'll never forget, I got a Nikon D3000, and the healing began. I started taking pictures, and I immersed myself into doing that for the remaining 5 months. And I still struggled. I struggled to get on the train. That was really hard. Yeah, it was really hard. Getting onto the train. I would take my camera and walk everywhere because I didn't really want to ride the trains. And finally, after about 9 months, I finally got myself ready. And coming back to work, I came back to work, but I really came back with a grain of salt. I was bitter. I was bitter because it wasn't the job I wanted to do anymore. I didn't love the trains anymore. I didn't love moving the trains. It was tough. I was always scared of someone jumping in front of the train again. That took a lot of energy out of me to come into work every day. So it became something I disliked. I can honestly say it probably took me about 2 to 3 years before I could finally say I liked operating. I liked moving a train again. But if there was one thing that did come out of that whole experience, I'd have to say it was the camera. I don't think I ever would have got into photography if it wasn't for my what we call it's called the 12-9. I started photography 6 years ago now. When I started, I love taking pictures of the street. I could just walk. I could walk forever and just take pictures. And I've lived in New York my whole life. That's over 40 years now. I've lived in New York, born and raised here. But it wasn't until I started doing photography that I realized how great this city is. And it's a great city. This is it right here for me. The sanctuary, my peace after a long day. Some pictures. I love it. I always used to say that, when I got older and I retired from work, I would leave New York. And, I always said I would leave with a big smile on my face. I'd be happy to leave this city. But now, I don't know. I mean, I probably will leave because with the way the economy is, I might not be able to afford New York City. But while I'm here, I love it. I do. I like it. I love that I can get ice cream at 3 in the morning if I really want it. Whereas if you go to most places in the world, you can't do that. I love that there is a 24-hour subway that I can go. I can take pictures at 3 in the morning. I can get up and I can get from A to B because there is a subway, which also being a transit worker, I don't pay for. I just go right in for free and I go. That's one of the perks. I'm lucky because I can do so many different aspects of photography in this one city. Portraits, which is one of my favorites. Landscape photography. You can find landscapes in New York. The architecture is amazing. If you can't find it in New York, it might not exist. And one of the things I love is after I take the picture, I can't wait to go home to edit. That's like, I feel like a kid again, like a kid who had his candy or who has his toy, That's how it makes me feel. It just gives me a satisfaction that I never felt before. And I love the innocence of it, It's so peaceful. I can just, it takes the stress away from me. And I love if I could take a picture of a person and they really like it and they say, wow, it's an amazing picture. They bring out the best of an individual because photography brings out the best in me. Photography was something that can belong to me. It's mine. It's no one else's. I don't have to share it with anybody unless I choose to. It's all me. It comes from my heart and from everything inside of me. And that is something that I didn't have until I found it. It's my passion. I could shoot. I hope I can take pictures until the day that I die. I really do. I would never want to stop. And I can't even imagine at this point in time a life without a camera. It's my everything, for me. New York is probably is the best place on earth. Yeah, New York is as good as it can get. And that's because of just the variations of things you can do in New York. You don't need a car in New York City. If you live in New York City, you really don't need a car. And everything is at your fingertips. It really is. That's beautiful. And it's a beautiful city. And it's also safe. It wasn't always safe, but it's a fairly safe city. So yeah, I mean, it's even the sports teams, you have so much, like there's nothing that you can really miss in New York. Maybe then some peace and quiet, which you might miss, but I can usually find ways to find that too. I wouldn't, especially being a photographer, I don't think I'd leave New York anytime soon. It's a great city, yeah.